Come on. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Andrew.
So,
Lovely day we're having. Lovely weather.
it says we're live. Here we go. Come on. Wait. Hello, Kevin. See, I played back the. That's cool. Anyway, we're done now. Um, so, good evening and welcome to QU Hot Takes. I'm Andrew White, alongside all of the following: Kevin Slattery, Justin Ellis, Joe Bertolami, and Andrew Marshall. Say hello, everybody.
Good evening, gentlemen. I've got my draft hat for the Eagles back in the studio tonight. I'm super hyped for tomorrow, as you can tell.
Oh, that's beautiful. How's it going, fam? Can't wait for this Giants draft pick. Finally get an O lineman. Can't wait. Hopefully.
What's good, everyone?
Marshall's got a super big. What would you even call it? What would you name your document that you have?
I think I named it the animal
Yeah.
in all caps. It's basically like a big notes document for all the prospects that I watch film on, which is probably about 85 guys at this point.
Marsh, how far does that go back? Like, when did you start that document? It's
When did
crazy.
I started probably November,
Wow.
and then I probably touched
Ooh.
in January.
Yeah.
So
No, it's super,
yeah.
super cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I like going back just to kind of see what I thought then. But yeah, I mean, I'm so pumped for tomorrow.
Well, let's see, Justin. Do you have a? I feel like you're a type of guy who also has a document. Out of everybody in this group, I imagine it would be you and Marshall that both have documents.
Yeah, I have a spreadsheet. It just I have some accumulations of all of the draft boards out there, just kind of able to accumulate it all in the one kind of spreadsheet page. And then I have my own kind of mock drafts up next to it, so I can kind of compare and contrast what people think the team needs are. People who have a bit more of ear to the NFL than us common predictors would have.
I love that. That's good. I love that. All right. Well, we got a couple questions, and then maybe we'll just dive into I guess you could say random stuff. Um, so number one, this is a question that might take a little while. How many quarterbacks do you gentlemen believe will be um, drafted in the first round? And if you'd like to give touches on maybe some specific guys and where they might go, the floor is all yours. So, Justin, do you mind if I go to you first? Or you?
Sure, I'll take that number one to the Bengals. I think it's hard to deny that at that point. I won't touch on it further there. Obviously, it gets interesting when you talk about Tua and Herbert. They're both definitely going to be first-round top 10 prospects. It's a matter of where they go. The Dolphins and Chargers seem like clear frontrunners, with the Jaguars being a bit of a dark horse, I would say, in this scenario. I'm definitely leaning toward the Chargers trading up to get Herbert here, and the Dolphins sticking with Tua. There's a lot of smoke and random stuff going out there right now with the Dolphins trading up for an offensive lineman. I just think after all this process, I'm not sold on it. And then I also like Jordan Love to go at some point later in the round of the draft, probably by a team trading up from the second round to get him. The 49ers have talked about shipping their picks away because they have no value in the second, third, or fourth round. So they're looking to trade back, obviously. So look for them to be a possible trade contender for someone looking to grab Jordan Love.
Marshall, you wanna touch on that? You've nodded your head a couple times, or you got your
Yeah,
own opinions?
I think it's pretty spot on. I think Burrow at one, and then I could see the Dolphins going Herbert just because the situation with Tua's medical is kind of murky at this point. We don't really know what's a smokescreen and what's not from that standpoint, but I think
Herbert and Tua both go in the top 10 still. And as Justin mentioned, Jordan Love's the wild card. I don't know when a team's actually going to trade up for him, but I think the Niners are going to try to be dealing their pick. The Browns apparently are trying to move back as well. And the Jags are a wild card because the Jags kind of determine, really how this board falls.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a bunch of things about Love possibly going to New England. I know that was like maybe in the past and stuff, but Joe, you're a New England fan. Would you rather the, Stidham Avenue or a different avenue, or what are your thoughts?
I don't see the Patriots taking a QB in the first round. From what I've heard, it's pretty much, as sad as it makes me, it's pretty much Hoyer or Stidham at this point as the 2020 starter. But you never know. I do see 4 quarterbacks in the first round that we all mentioned: Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Love. I definitely see the Pats taking a QB at some point, but it might be 3rd round or maybe the later rounds as well.
Well, Kev, so you don't feel like you're having to, say the same thing. Do you have a quarterback outside of Burrow, unless you think it was never him to begin with, that you think is the best quarterback in this draft? I feel like the rest might be up to debate, or even the number 1 spot.
No, I don't have a difference of opinion on number 1. I think it's as straightforward as it gets with Burrow. I mean, he has the most impressive resume, I think, so far of any of the quarterbacks, just based off that one season he had at LSU. It's the best college football season by a quarterback I've seen in my lifetime, even though it's an admittedly short lifetime. But I see him going first to the Bengals. I probably see Tua going next, honestly, and then in that order, the descending order from Herbert and then to Love. Although I could see Love going in the 2nd round maybe, because I think the really QB needy teams are the ones that are making it apparent that they're desperate for a quarterback are front loaded in the draft. So Love or Herbert, depending on who's left, could be waiting for a longer time depending on who's picked. Because I kind of think there's a drop off after Tua. Admittedly, I'm not as high on Herbert and Love, but that's just from, again, some draft videos that I've watched on them. So it's we'll see though. It could play out any way.
And I agree with Kev that that's actually a very interesting point on Herbert. We can all say that we feel very high about the fact that Herbert and Tua will probably go to the Dolphins, Chargers, or vice versa, but you really don't know. I mean, even though, like I said earlier, the Dolphins trading up for an offensive lineman is probably a smokescreen, you never know if someone like Isaiah Simmons drops down to the Chargers, what the Chargers would do in that situation. Because having Simmons on that safety line next to Derwin James would make it one of the craziest secondaries in the league for a team that's already considered one of the top 5 secondaries in the league with the add of Chris Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think Simmons would be really tempting to take there if you want to play him either in like a hybrid role. I know they also have Desir.
Yeah, top 5, I think.
Okay, so I mean, if Simmons goes there, I mean that gets really interesting really quickly because they're one of the only teams in the NFL that can probably really match up with what the Chiefs do.
Now, I know there's been some problems with Tua's health, or at least a lot of people may feel that way. But a lot of people have decided that he's doing well, he's recuperating well, and I forget who said this, but I read this yesterday, that one of the analysts mentioned that Tua has a better throwing arm than Aaron Rodgers and Dan Marino. I just wanted to, ask before we try to maybe,
That's a hot take.
So maybe before segueing before, you can see him being drafted. I mean, we can go to Joe because I know you thought that was a hot take, so go for it.
Yeah, no, that's just like probably the two greatest arm talents of all time. So that's anyone compared to those two is a hot take. But Tua is definitely an interesting case where the injury history could play a factor, but at the same time, I mean, I have him going 5 to the Dolphins, which would definitely be pretty early. I think a lot of mock drafts have that as well, but it's up to how much the rest of teams are willing to put into that. And I don't know, could you guys see him falling late first round, or I don't really see him getting past the Chargers. Those are two teams with the Dolphins and the Chargers definitely looking to draft a QB. So I'm just interested to hear your guys' thoughts.
Yeah, it's a tough call for sure because obviously, and they highlight this on ESPN and ever so much, Corona has played a role in being able to evaluate Tua's position as far as health goes. And I think with that, I would say the highest you could go is 3. Someone could trade up and take the Lions pick and get him there. But I would say I could 100% see him dropping as low as 18 right now to the Dolphins' second pick in the first round. I wouldn't be surprised if every team was scared of this. We've seen drops with quarterbacks before. A team's quarterback needy, and they're like, there's enough quarterbacks out there that we can make do, or they might be way down the road for someone like Trevor Lawrence or someone of that caliber. They may just want to wait a year and, maybe blow another season away, maybe have a chance at someone who's much better the next season than taking a risk on someone like Tua.
Marsh, you want to give your standpoint on Tua? I know you got a big vision on like quarterbacks and how they work. So
I mean, I've got Tua as my 12th ranked player on my board right now, but that's not even including for medicals. So Herbert's my 18th ranked player. If I knew Tua's medicals and they weren't good, he would drop below Herbert, but before Love. So it's really hard to kind of like grade the medical standpoint. I think the lowest he could drop is about pick 13. Because I think if he gets to 13, I think the Niners are going to auction off that pick, and I think the Patriots are pretty good suitors to actually come up. Because I think they stylistically like that type of quarterback who kind of is like quick game.
Gets rid of it quick, yeah.
Yeah, quick game, kind of like a pocket manager instead of, an improviser like a Jordan Love. So I could see that fit, and, I really think that Kyle Shanahan or Bill Belichick kind of did Kyle Shanahan like a little bit of a favor in terms of giving up Garoppolo for a second. Because I think he probably could have held out and traded him for more to another team. But Shanahan's and Bill really have a really tight connection. So I like to think of it from the human element of that as well. But, I mean, Tua... Normally, you have some idea about a guy's medical, but like his history for injuries, it's a real concern for me too. I don't know if he can stay healthy. He's had 2 ankle surgeries. He's had a hand issue. He's had that hip injury, which is like both. I don't necessarily subscribe to the theory that that's a freak injury because that it's a dislocated hip and he fractured like the posterior wall. I'm not a doctor, but like that doesn't sound good.
yeah, I'm as everybody knows, I'm a Georgia fan. I don't like Alabama, and I used to think Tua was awful. I'll be honest. I'll just admit that I used to think he was awful. You guys have heard it before, and I'll admit that I'm wrong. It took me a while, but I've always discussed how the health problems could maybe be a concern. I wouldn't really have been as worried about his injuries if the hip thing didn't happen. Like, I realize all the other ones are bad too, but that hip one also, I hate to be that guy, but Saban really blew that mission. He really didn't need to be out there during that time. But that hip one is a bad injury, especially for a guy who's all about the hip movements when he throws. He twists his body a lot. I don't know. That one's definitely the toughest for me to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right on that one. You mentioned Tua. I think he does use his hips a little bit more. He's not like this massive guy. He has to generate torque somehow with the ball. So, he's really using his whole lower body. The hip thing is really what's more concerning, but combined with all the other injuries, it's really what makes you think with one of these top picks.
Absolutely. All right, let's head on over to wide receivers. So I know there's been, I guess you can say, what would we say, 3 guys that are at the very top of their game that people are interchanging a lot. That would be CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, and wait, why am I blanking? Oh, Ruggs. Sorry. So I want all of you to give me your order of which 3, or the order of those 3 guys and how you think they should be picked. And I'm going to be honest with you, I feel like we're all going to have different answers because that's kind of how a lot of people have been looking at them. But if you want to go into a little bit more depth, just send it. So whoever wants to go first, go for it.
I'll go.
So you're Kev?
I feel like for me, I got Judy first. I have Lamb second, and then I have Ruggs third. For me, I could go into that later, but that's just my opinion.
I got the same one. So yeah, I got Judy going, just because I look at Judy and like a lot of it has to do with the competition they played. Like I go back and forth between him and Lamb, and I think they're very similar talent. He stepped on campus there as a freshman, and I don't know how they'll pan out as pros, but just assessing that, and I look at the tape and the competition they played, that kind of does it for me. Between Judy and Lamb, then obviously I have Ruggs third, more of a different type of player. I think he's kind of like a speedster. You could probably use him as a punt return guy, kind of a different type of receiver. But overall, that's my top three I have.
But before I cut to you two, I just want to touch on your. But I was just saying before I go to you two, you talking about Ruggs and his speed. I know Justin mentioned this to me earlier, so this is how I'll segue to you. Like Ruggs going to the Chiefs and building that sort of offense. I know Justin, if you want to, I don't know if you want to add that into your discussion of those three guys, but go for it.
Yeah, no, that's really funny, and I'd actually seen I always sometimes like to just Google like a team and then the word trade after them to see what people's trade rumors are. And when I Google Chiefs, the number one trade that comes up is them trading up for Henry Ruggs.
Oh my!
Which would I can't imagine Ruggs and Tyreek just running down the field. It would. I don't know why the secondary wouldn't just sit in the end zone and wait for them to come for them at that point. But I personally think that how the draft will play out is that it will be Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, similar to you two. I honestly have Ruggs as my number one personally because I think NFL teams are probably going to try to duplicate those kinds of Chiefs offense. Those receivers who have that kind of speed are going to be a lot more valuable, I feel like. And I think that's also why you see someone like Justin Jefferson being ranked fourth and outside the top three, is because he's not known. He has a decent speed, but he's not known as well for his speed. He's known more so for his route running ability. And I feel like because of that, it's not the kind of X factor that teams like to look for in the draft or look for on a team. Justin Jefferson could add a lot to an offense as a number 2 wide receiver, but when a team's looking for an X factor number 1, these three are the three you're looking at. So I do think it will go Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, but I 100% think that people should be taking a much harder look at Ruggs and how it could possibly fit into their offense.
Marsh, what about you?
So I'm going to be the contrarian here. I have Ruggs as my number 3 as well, simply because I think if you have Ruggs on your team, you need like you think the Chiefs. The Chiefs have Tyreek Hill, but Travis Kelce kind of functions as their number 1, in terms of third down targets and a lot of, working that short to intermediate areas of the field. I have CeeDee Lamb as my number 1 receiver, and for a few reasons. One, there's 2 elite traits that I absolutely fall in love with, and it's his run after the catch ability, and it's his tracking. There's some things he does from a standpoint of like tracking the football, where he can look away while the ball's in flight and establish body position to make some of these like contested catches that I think he's really good at. And when I see that mentally, that's something I saw with A.J. Brown last year and I really like. So it's a little bit of like, what's your flavor? I think these guys are all really close. I think his hands are a little bit better than Judy as well. Now, if you like Judy is a phenomenal route runner. It's not a debate who's the best route runner in this class. It's Jerry Judy.
Yeah.
So
he makes guys look silly, honestly.
Some of the
highlights.
He can shake dudes in a phone booth. So I mean,
yeah.
Judy's my number. He's currently my number 8 overall player, and I have Lamb at 7.
Do you think they will be drafted around there, or I realize like your overalls aren't going to be the same, but with how good they are, do you think they'll all go in top 10?
I think they're going to go a little. I think the receiver run's going to be a little later because I think some of those tackles are going to be bumped up a little bit. But I think these are phenomenal players. I think they're I don't know if they're necessarily all pro level players like a Julio Jones, but I think they're actually pretty good projections as Pro Bowl players.
I think you hit on a very interesting question there, Whitey, about where do these wide receivers kind of fall? Because obviously, I think a lot of people are similar to Marshall, where on their draft board they're probably top 10 players.
Yeah.
And in this situation, it's very difficult to tell because there's all this talk that obviously there could be an offensive line run. Obviously, there'll be a wide receiver run at some point. There'll be a quarterback run in the first 5 picks probably. But I'm going to honestly say I would not be surprised if we see the wide receiver run in the top 10 and offensive line surprisingly takes a turn down. We've seen offensive linemen like I think of the Chiefs-Jaguars draft where they had the first 2 picks. It was Eric Fisher and I can't remember the other offensive lineman drafted off the top of my head with the first 2 overall picks. But when that happened, and both of them I don't think turned up to be anything fantastic. But following that, I think there was a lot of talk about the fact that maybe teams who are at the top of the draft are going for those kind of heavy value players who could really be difference makers on the team, because you don't often find yourself in a position, unless you are that bad of a team, where you have those kinds of picks. And I think teams are realizing that their fan base wants them to aggressively tackle with those picks. So I would not be surprised if teams that are in that wide receiver run that March is probably talking between picks, I'm going to say 12 to 15, with teams like the Raiders, 49ers, and Broncos as those key picks. But teams like that trading up into the top 10 to guarantee they get the wide receiver they want.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, if those teams don't necessarily, need a lineman as bad as the first 10 picks or whatever, but they could have a fear that teams in the past should have drafted O-line and they were stupid and drafted some stick wide receiver that doesn't really work out if you don't have the O-line. So I guess they might fear a similar situation in this draft, but. Moving on, let's go with sleepers in the first round. So, I mean, this can either be, somebody that's a 15th to 20th pick range and people actually think will be good, but you think he's one of the best players ever, or somebody that you just don't see anywhere in the first round that you really think people should be talking about a little bit more. So, by all means, go for it. Anybody got one? Joe?
Yeah, I like running back from LSU, Clyde Edwards Hilaire. That's his, yeah. I know he had like the hyphenated last name. Because I haven't seen him as far as running backs go, he's definitely up there, but I haven't seen too many people put him as a first round grade. But just what he can do, I think in the passing game as well as running the football, he was such a versatile player for that LSU team, and I think definitely gets overshadowed just because of how stacked that team was between Burrow at QB, Chase and Jefferson at receiver, but they were able to run the ball so effectively, and I think he's a guy who's going to translate better. I think he's going to be a better pro than he was a college player, and he was a fantastic college player. I just think, if he can get in a good system, I've heard possibly Tampa Bay taking him. We know Brady loves throwing to the running backs, so I think a team like that who has, who can use him in that passing role as well as running the ball, I think that's just benefit a lot of teams. So I don't know if he'll go in the first round, but I definitely think he's a sleeper that you should definitely keep your eye on.
I agree with that actually, and you put me on his train. I think it was the last probably 4 weeks of the football season. Mm-hmm. I remember you were telling me about him, and I didn't really notice it as much until you pointed him out. And you're right. He's real good. For myself, I'll just go with Christian Fulton. I realize he'll probably go pretty high in the draft, cornerback for LSU. But Marsh has touched on this before on our show with me. He got a little overshadowed this year because of that freshman, Stingley, I think was his name.
Yeah, Derek Stingley.
Yeah, because Stingley, I mean, in mine and Marsh's opinion on this year's change is that he'll probably be one of the best for a long time. And Fulton is just he's just fast and he's absurdly good and he's probably the best one, but he got a little overshadowed last year. I remember watching and guys like Kurt Herbstreit were commentating. They're like, yeah, they're going to they're going to send the ball Fulton's way again because he's having an off game. And I'm like, that was just so odd to me. It was just because Stingley was playing so well. So I think that's a guy that people really slept on, specifically this year, though.
Yeah, Fulton's a really high-level player. For me personally, if we're talking sleepers, I think I'm going to have to go Jalen Reagor out of TCU. And I think he was a player that had really bad I think he slept on for a few reasons. One, he tried to bulk up and gain weight at his combine, and he ran a 4.42, which, if you watch him on film, I think he's more like a 4.3, 4.35 guy. I mean, the dude can really run, and he high points the ball. He makes a lot of contested catches, and he's a really dynamic athlete. I think he can kind of fill one of these Deebo Samuel / also serve as your deep threat Henry Ruggs type role. And he might be there at the end of the first round, early second round. So he had such bad quarterback play this year. And I mean really bad. He'd be wide open down the field. And, it was kind of sad to see, but he's a dynamic athlete, so he'd be a guy I'd be willing to pull the trigger on.
Justin or Kev, you guys got any, or should I move on?
I actually think I do for me. I think I'm going to go with, this is one of your boys, Andrew Thomas out of Georgia.
Ooh.
Only because I think some teams are going to be more O-line specific and tackle needy than I think people were letting on, where I could see a team like the Cardinals wanting to have a good tackle play. Even, honestly, the Chargers, where they have Bulaga, but he's kind of older, 31, and they don't really have anyone else there. Both New York teams, obviously, bad O-lines the last several years. And even Miami, too, if you want to believe the rumors, they're, quote-unquote, maybe looking for an O-tackle. So I feel like there's going to be more O-tackles taken early on, or just O-linemen taken early on than people maybe think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair one, too. He's, in my opinion, he's the second best O-lineman that's out there for this draft. I like Becton a lot. But, all right, Justin, that was a good one, Kev. Justin, you got any?
Yeah, I do. I really like, personally, Marlon Davidson, an edge rusher out of Auburn. What'd you say, Marsh?
I was just saying the same word that you were saying.
Yeah, I really liked him because he not only tied top-ranked defensive tackle Derek Brown in tackles for loss this season, but he also led Auburn's team in sacks this season. He's been doing a great job. He also had the second most blocked kicks this season in college football with 3 blocked kicks, which I think is just crazy if you can block 3 kicks in one season. So I'll give him a lot of credit for that one as well. I have him currently going as a late round kind of sleeper pick to Seattle. I don't think a lot of people have him projected to go in the first round right now, but I think Seattle, after probably not being able to re-sign Clowney, will be really needy at the edge position. And this will be a great fit, I think, to fill that Clowney role and get some young legs in there. But I'm also saying that with a bit of hesitation, because Seattle's a very interesting team, as there's a lot of players out there that Seattle could trade for with that first pick. Seattle's a very tricky team to predict because they could very easily trade out of the first round for one of those veteran NFL talents to fill other needs on the team.
Well, speaking of trading, so you're so good at segueing, Justin. It's incredible. It's almost like you produced these questions.
No.
It's funny because he did. But so let's go with trades. So what teams do you think, either stupidly or smartly, do you think might actually trade up for players? Or, I mean, I guess we can even talk about trading back. I feel like that's harder to maybe figure out. But if you wanted to, go for it. Because I know, teams like the Patriots, I think Marshall pointed out to all of us yesterday or 2 days ago that, I mean, I know it's over the next couple of years, but they got so many draft picks. But yeah, do you see, teams like the Dolphins? I've noticed in the past that they would try to, give away everything to get Joe Burrow for number 1. I know that's a little bit outrageous, but we can go for it. Any teams that you think will or should trade for any reason tomorrow?
I mean, I can list a million teams, but
Give me like your top two.
my top two. Okay, well, I'll say this. I'll say a number, and then I'll tell you my two teams. My first number is the number 8. I think there could be 8 teams trading their first round picks during this draft, moving their picks around, kind of trying to maneuver this. I feel like I always underpredict trades. This might be the first year I overpredict them, but I'm trying to be safe than sorry this year. The first one, I'm going to actually talk about Seattle again, just because I feel like I brought them up and I kind of want to cover it more. We've talked about a lot of possible players that are veterans who could possibly be involved in a trade. Jamal Adams, safety out of the New York Jets, obviously a trade target. Yannick from the Jaguars is a trade target. There's a few other players like Redskins offensive lineman Trent Williams and so forth. But I think Yannick and Adams are the two players that are probably worth a late first rounder, in my opinion. And I think the Seahawks have a need at both safety to fill the need that Earl Thomas left open a few years ago, as well as I already mentioned the Jadeveon Clowney role. So I feel like the Jaguars or Jets could try to trade away this talent in order to get that late first round pick from the Seahawks. And I would say my second one, I'm just going to say the Browns are going to move back, in my opinion. There's just been so much talk throughout the offseason about the possibility of the Falcons trying to get a good defensive lineman, of a team trying to trade up in order to get an elite wide receiver. The Browns are probably going to go an offensive tackle here, and I just don't think they need an offensive tackle as much as the draft class will have possibly at that point. So I feel like by moving back to maybe 5 picks back, 10 picks back, you don't know. It could be the Broncos. It could be any of those wide receiver teams. I'll even throw in the Eagles as a possible wild card to trade up. But I think that the Browns will find a way to trade back and to accumulate more picks of value. And I'll just point out a third team real quick and say the 49ers will do so as well. I'm just not so sure in what regard.
Very good. Marshall, do you have any specific trades, or are you not into that as much?
So, I mean, I think Justin and I have probably read a lot of the similar stuff. The Browns really do seem set on. I heard from Dan Brugler that one of the things he's most confident about is them trading back because they like offensive tackle Ezra Cleveland, who I do not have as a top 50 player, and they want to take him in the first round. So that's okay. That's cool. We're all friends here. But I don't think they want to stay put at 10 unless there's a tackle that they like. But a team that I think is absolutely going to trade up is the Atlanta Falcons. And it's because their GM and their coach, they're on a short leash. They have to absolutely win this year, and they need some more help on defense. So I think they're either going to trade up for C.J. Henderson or Javon Kinlaw from 16. And so they could be trading with the Browns as well.
If you want a hot take out there, I'll throw out that the Chargers are gonna trade up just to make sure that they get Tua in front of the Dolphins. But maybe they even do it to make sure they get Herbert. Who knows? Or go as far as to get Joe Burrow at number 1. Who knows?
You're not a big Tyrod believer, no?
I think your hot take is probably right on, Andrew.
Wait, for which part though?
I think they'll trade up. I think they're going to trade up for Herbert personally. And I think it's going to be trading up to the Giants pick. And I solely think that because of the fact that they've been talking a lot about the fact that the Giants have been doing research on Justin Herbert. And Giants fans freaked out for a second because they were like, oh my God, it's because they're going to try to make Justin Herbert their quarterback and bail on Daniel Jones. Obviously, that's not the case. This isn't a Josh Rosen scenario here. I wholeheartedly expect them to trade back this pick because they're doing the research on Herbert. First of all, they kind of go with that Belichick mantra. They have another Patriots head coach now on their team, so basically they're trying to kind of navigate what these quarterbacks may be like when they play them later in the season. But I also think they're trying to interpret what Justin Herbert's trade value is. So to see where their organization would value him, so that when it gets to their pick, they are ready after blowing all this smoke that the Giants organization, I'm going to say, this is my hot take right here. The Giants organization has been blowing smoke saying that the Dolphins aren't in on Tua. in order to make people want to trade, in order to make the Chargers want to trade with them to make sure that they get Herbert, because they're worried about the Dolphins trying to get Herbert.
Dude, that's like you think in like these weird ways, but then when you explain it, I'm like, it's not like the worst thing I've ever heard.
I think he's like spot on it. Like you get into these like little mental loops, but like this is how teams kind of operate. They're throwing smoke screens left and right here. Like the day before the draft is probably. It's so hard because there's so much stuff that's getting out that's actually true, and then there's other stuff that is just so off point. And it's all being like tweeted out like kind of strategically. Teams really use like a lot of the media for these purposes. So, the smart teams can kind of sort through this information, but sometimes teams are pretty good at throwing other guys off their scent.
Oh, sorry. I thought Joe was gonna say something. Never mind. But
No, I was actually gonna say, kind of digressing from your question, but something I'm very interested in is these. There's a lot of quarterbacks. Proven quarterbacks in the league, Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, who don't have teams yet. I just think it's going to be very interesting to see, teams we think are going to draft quarterbacks, which of them are going to maybe go in on Cam Newton or Jameis. Like, I don't think that's out of the question as well. A lot of risk with these rookies, not seeing them in NFL snaps. I don't think it would be a bad decision for a team like, maybe the Chargers to go after Cam. I don't know, just kind of another direction you could go if you need a quarterback.
Yeah, I've thought about that too a few times. Cam Newton just a few years back we saw as like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Some would even still argue when he's healthy he is. So you're right, because a lot of teams normally do. I mean, especially a lot of teams do this where they have like a veteran quarterback and then they draft a rookie and then the next year they'll play. I mean, that was the plan for Danny Dimes, until something happened for the Giants. But it is a little weird that you don't see teams trying to do that and then also getting the draft pick. But it's still up in the air. They still could do that. But actually, it's a good point.
Yeah, I think Cam is probably the one you want to go after. I've heard more of Jameis and Dalton looking to assume more of a backup type role.
Yeah, I've never liked Andy Dalton, but that's because one of my favorite players out of Georgia was ruined by him for many years, and that would be AJ Green.
Yeah.
So
that's tough.
But that's a personal like whatever. I'm sure he's a lovely human being. But so let's go with players that are maybe projected super high in this draft that we think will go really far back because they stink, or you have a hot take and you think no, they don't belong anywhere near the first round, but people say they are. Let's shoot for it. Oh, and by the way, if anybody's wondering why me, Joe, and Marsh have laughed in the past 5 minutes, it's because one of our suite mates said to something stupid. So I apologize.
And he knows we're doing this right now, so it's
he's probably watching, trying to see a reaction. Anyway, let's go with overrated players in this first round. Who wants to go first, or does nobody have it?
Chase Young.
What?
Ooh.
Oh, Chase.
I actually didn't have a follow up to that. Ooh, overrated players. Well, I have Jordan Love at 49 on my board, so he's pretty far down there.
And he apparently might go first round. So I see your dilemma here, Marsh.
Yeah. So Denzel Mintz is a guy that he's like one of these like Twitter darlings that's been picking up a lot of buzz. A lot of guys think he's like a first round receiver, but I didn't see that whole level of production at Baylor. So he's still at the back end of my top 50, but as a first round player, like I think it's a little bit of a reach, but he might be in that first round range.
If you want to hear a reach, I saw a mock draft this morning that had Mims going over Ruggs, which also meant he went over Jefferson too.
Did you write that one or what?
I have no idea.
That's aggressive for sure. So
Overrated player. This is gonna sound crazy. I don't think he's overrated as a player, but Joe Burrow as a consensus number one, I totally understand it, but like I don't see that doing a ton for the Bengals. I feel like that's such a flawed roster, where I wasn't opposed to them maybe trading the pick and trying to get more assets. Where that is just such a stacked division, and they're only getting better. Like the Ravens are getting better, the Browns are getting better, Pittsburgh's getting Big Ben back. So while we're crowning him the number one prospect, I don't know if that's really gonna pay off a ton for the Bengals, honestly.
yeah, I mean that's a type of team that really has problems in a lot of areas. It's one of those things where I don't even know if it's arguably anymore, but Joe Burrow had the greatest college football season, frankly, ever. And I see your point actually that it might be a good idea to utilize that power of such a good season to get like so many draft picks. I think there was one of the things that people thought was going to be offered for that pick, or maybe it was actually offered, was like all of the Dolphins' first round picks that they have or something, and their first and second round picks or something, plus like other stuff down the line, And it's crazy to think that you can get all of that on top of, you would have just gotten like Herbert, which would have been probably okay with all those other picks. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I actually I don't hate that take whatsoever. I think it gets a little dicey because if you're the Bengals and you're actively calling the Dolphins, if you end up sticking with Burrow, I don't know what message that sends because you're still the Bengals, and I think he has some leverage over you. But, I mean, if Tua's health was a little bit better or you liked Herbert, it depends what the price is, but, like, yeah, you're the Bengals. Like, you're not exactly, like, attracting a lot of guys in free agency. And, like, the Dolphins are the one team that has, like, all these picks. And they like Joe Burrow, so it's really interesting at that point.
Yeah, like it's not me thinking he's overrated as a player, but I don't know if he's gonna pan out if he goes to the Bengals. Whereas, a team like Miami, I think, is more set up to really, complement his skill set in a better way.
Like this, I know we're a year away, but like I don't think Burrow is at the caliber of Trevor Lawrence, where. Like, I think when Trevor Lawrence comes in the league, I think there's like an actual possibility that he's like a top 5 quarterback.
Yep.
And a pretty high likelihood that he hits. I think Burrow's in that next tier where he could be like a 6 to 10 guy in the league. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know with Burrow. Like, yeah, he still did have that 1 year production. He's not Andrew Luck. I don't think he's going to be Trevor Lawrence. He's not John Elway. But those guys don't come around very often. And even with them, you don't. No, for sure, because a bad franchise is going to get them. They might screw them up.
Yeah, if I'm the Bengals and I got offered all 3 of the Dolphins' first rounders, I don't even care if they gave me anything after that. I'd probably take it, to be honest with you. If I'll have to show you guys what my Madden franchise mode I've been doing during this offseason looks like. I'm very big on trying to get as many first-round picks as possible, no matter what it takes. I think right now in Madden franchise mode, I have next year's draft that I'm doing. I'm projected to have 20 of the 32 first-rounders.
What? That's absurd.
And my team has been in the Super Bowl the past 8 years in a row, so it's not like I'm playing badly. It's just I care about accumulating draft picks at no matter what cost. There's always a way to fill in for one position. The Bengals should really trade back to the Dolphins pick and then trade back to the Chargers pick again and just accumulate everything they possibly can, because they could move back 6 picks and probably get 5 more quality starters on their offense that they need. So I personally think that they should take that trade. Obviously, they're not going to. They're going to go and think that a quarterback can save a team, which maybe it can. Who knows? But
Justin, maybe you should be in charge of some of these teams if you can get that many picks and be in the Super Bowl 8 years in a row.
Yeah, if only the real world worked like Madden, I feel like if it did, I feel like the other owners would kick me out of the league.
I mean, that's how I feel about backyard football. I've never missed a Superdome Bowl in probably every year I've played that game since 2003. So
That's that Belichick mentality, you know. Get that draft capital. A little extreme with the 23 first rounders.
Yeah, something like that. I'll have to send a
philosophy.
picture later.
Yeah.
You can post it on the Twitter afterwards.
There's a glitch in Madden franchise where you can, like, if you want a player, you can't, like, the computer doesn't like letting you trade for sweet players, so you switch their position to like punter, and they turn into like a
Oh, that's great.
That's funny. I like that. That's good. Actually, I'm gonna go a little bit away from the draft just for one question because you guys kind of touched on this a little bit now. Will the Buccaneers now that Gronk showed up in Tampa, will the Buccaneers be some Super Bowl contending type team, or will they be like the Steelers, who arguably had some of the best offense ever a few years back and just they don't win Super Bowls? Or is that just a stupid comparison? I just want to see what your guys' thoughts are because there's a lot of buzz going around how sweet the offense of the Buccaneers have quote unquote become.
I'm still shedding tears for O.J. Howard right now. Poor guy. I feel like he just deserved a better life than what he got. He got Jameis just not throwing him the ball, and now he's just become overshadowed by Gronk. So my heart goes out to him. I really hope they find a way to trade him. I'm shocked he wasn't part of that Patriots trade deal. But as far as what this does for the Buccaneers, I don't think it moves the needle as much as others think, because I do think O.J. Howard is probably as good as where Gronk is going to be coming back. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think O.J. Howard has top 5 tight end talent. He just didn't have the right quarterback or the right system for it to work for him in. And I feel like Gronk still won't be in the best situation just because of the fact there's so many mouths to feed on that team. And I think you're putting a lot of faith in Tom Brady, who is going to be expected to throw the ball a lot as of right now with Ronald Jones as their running back. I just can't imagine that Brady's going to be able to throw the ball 50 times per game, and it's really going to lead that team to being extremely successful. I have them as one of the 2 wild card teams with the new format this year, is where I roughly have them, especially in a division where the Saints are obviously a Super Bowl Howard team. I honestly like where the Panthers are headed with Teddy Bridgewater, and a Falcons team that has missed for a long time, but obviously still has the weapons to make a Super Bowl run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Justin, I think it's definitely a lot of hype. Probably more validated than, say, like the Browns hype last offseason. I know a lot of people in the media thought the Browns were gonna just rise to a contender with the addition of elite skill players, but I think, you know, the Buccaneers have as talented an offense as there is between, you know, Brady being such a proven quarterback, and then you have 2 young star receivers. I think Evans and Godwin finished both in the top 5 receiving yards last season. Granted, they throw the ball a lot, but I don't see them as an instant contender with this move just because looking at the division, you know, the Saints are always going to play well. The Panthers are moving in a good direction, especially with Matt Rule. I think is a very bright young mind, and there's, you know, certainly can be a contender, but I don't think, you know, I think with their tough schedule as well, it's just a lot of factors. Like, it's not going to be easy road for them by any means, but you know, certainly have talent. I just don't know if it's going to translate, you know.
That's good.
Yeah, I think this team is probably about a 10-6 team.
Yeah.
You know, just going over the roster, you know, I went over kind of like their over the cap situation to see who they were paying, which players they had where. Defensive line's pretty good. Devin White's good. They have 3 rookie corners, and that's like a big part of their team. How good those guys are. They were rookies last year, so they're going to be in their second year this year. So how well this trio plays is going to determine, you know, how good their pass defense is and how, you know, really just a lot of their success. But they need to improve their tackle play. Their guards and their center are pretty good. But yeah, I mean, you know, Donovan Smith and DeMar Dotson aren't really going to cut it, which is why I think if a tackle drops them in the class, I think that could have a huge impact on what they do. And then, you know, as Justin and Joe kind of mentioned, like Ronald Jones is back there. You know, if a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire could pick him up in the second round. I think that's a really good deal.
Mm-hmm.
But this team's gonna be a nightmare to deal with in the red zone. I don't care if Brady can move or not. Like this team is freaky in terms of its weapons.
Yeah, I mean, you got how tall is Evans? Like 6'4", and then you got Gronk who's 6'7", and like Brady who's known for throwing those types of passes his whole career. Like crazy.
Like, God.
But I agree. I think the Buccaneers. I personally think Ronald Jones is awful. Granted, I think their offensive line is not that good, but I don't think he's really good to begin with. So I agree. Second round, whether it's Edwards or, I mean, if Swift somehow falls that far, or even like a Jonathan Taylor, like anything.
Falls that far, go Swift. But
yeah, but like, or any of them, Jonathan Taylor too. Like, just I also agree that getting like a top 3 or 4 running back from this class, as long as it's in the second round, not the first, is probably a good move too.
They'll definitely be looking to do that. I've heard interviews with Bruce Arians saying, he thinks the addition of Brady is going to benefit their running backs most of all, and they're going to want to get they see Ronald Jones as more of a between the tackles type of guy, whereas they're going to want to surround him with those pass catchers like he had James White, Rex Burkhead, those types of players who can come out of the backfield. So I think the draft will be a prime place to do that.
I want to give one more shout out to O.J. Howard though, because my coworker asked me about fantasy advice when he realized I was really into football. And he said, like, what's the one advice? Like, I got to draft tomorrow. And I'm like, draft O.J. Howard high. Can't do it.
Justin got into your head for that one, huh?
I thought he was a really good player coming out, so I was like, hey, why can't he be good?
Yeah.
So
He is good.
I've heard that for so long. I've heard people telling me to draft him since he came into the league. Yeah.
He was like a Hawkinson coming out, but yeah, I planted my flag on that hill and I've died on that hill. So.
I will stay on the hill for as long as I need.
No, whatever. I'm staying on the hill with Justin.
Jameis had to play from behind. He had to throw a deep ball every play. O.J. Howard can't run as fast as Godwin and Evans. You gotta leave him alone.
Yeah, you guys have been on that train as long as I've wanted Gonzaga to win March Madness and the Bucks to win the finals, and so no matter what, maybe we'll all die there together. So I am gonna cut the live stream of this show, and we can stay on for like 5 minutes after, but just gonna say our goodbyes. This has been Q Hot Takes virtually, so much fun. My name's Andrew White. I've been alongside Andrew Marshall, Justin Ellis, Joe Bertolami, and Kevin Slattery. And by the way, next year Joe will be a much bigger presence on this show if he accepts. He's asked me about it, and I said by all means we're gonna add a 5th mic in there, and love to have you, Joe. So.
Oh yeah, excited. It's good times.
Good. All right, guys, it's a great day to be alive. Sweet dreams, and go Dogs.
Peace.
Peace, everybody.